Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. So today I have a guest host, Lee Witcher, who's going to be running the show. He's going to do his analysis. Oh, thank you for joining. Sorry, I'm a professional here. He's going to give us his analysis of the recent update. So, according to the data that I have, this is the passage indexing update, which for all of the SEO weather that we have recorded in our system, this is the largest update on record in terms of how many consecutive days the volatility lasted. And so it was a whopper of an update. And what's really interesting is kind of where things landed. So it's going to be a really good show. Let me say a quick hello in chat so that people know we're here and responding to questions. And I don't think Clint is here today. So I'm not sure that we'll go over what's on his show. But if you're looking for SEO content, Clint's show is one of the best shows out there. It's SEO This Week. You just go to YouTube and search for SEO This Week, and it'll be the top result. And another great show. It's an interview show of really prominent figures in the SEO community, tool developers, top tier SEOs, speakers, all sorts of individuals. And so if you want to find out, how they did what they did or what inspires them or get some great knowledge bombs dropped, check out the SEO video show. Again, just go to YouTube and search for it by name. So Lauren, what's coming up?
Yeah, so in addition to the regular programming, we have some exciting things coming up in IMG. We have a course actually releasing tomorrow, and that is on spreadsheets and how you can make them work for you and do some cool reporting and things like that for SEO. And then we have on the 8th a special program about landing high ticket clients, and that is with eRock. So he is well known in the SEO community, and we're really excited to have that come on the 8th. So check it out if you are or aren't in IMG, and we hope to see you there.
Yeah, if you've never met eRock, he's a really nice guy. I've worked with him in the past, and I don't think anyone has ever, worked harder to make things successful and awesome than him. And he's really good at networking. So I'd imagine if he has new content on landing big clients, he's probably going to have some really good tactics to share. So I'm excited for that. That's
Awesome.
very cool. All right. So with that, we will hand the slides over to Lee and we'll let him set the pace. Take it away, Lee.
Cool. We were having some discussions the other day about a couple of just SEO things. We thought, all right, let's throw it together out to the larger community. And so we'll start with this one. There was a news story that caused a little bit of discussion around. Google said, we do not measure title tags by pixels. Now, this one caught my eye for a different reason than it caught Ted's eye. It caught my eye because some research that we had done, or we were looking at a test recently in IMG, and it was looking at the size, and Moz had reported that the Google display titles max out at 600 pixels. So in looking at that, that makes sense in terms of there's just a certain amount of physical space that you can have there. But Google seemed to go a little bit further with that, and it stirred some discussion. So
now, an interesting thing about that slide and about Google statements in general is they don't measure titles by pixels. So there's there's room for some play there. It's like, well, yeah, the title really isn't part of the web page. It's metadata that appears in the browser tab, and the browser tabs are usually too short to read anyway, so it's metadata that web page visitors never see. It's cloaked keywords in a way. And Google often uses those titles for the link text in the search results. And I know I'm not wowing anybody with my SEO knowledge there. But what's interesting about the pixels claim, we don't measure titles by pixels, is they do measure other things by pixels. So there's a precedent for why people might think this. And it goes into Google's latest invention, which is Core Web Vitals. And the largest contentful paint is limited to the viewport rectangle of your device. And there are very much, definitely pixel constraints on the viewport. So if Google is able to say, this content is outside of the viewport rectangle, thus it won't count as part of your largest contentful paint calculations, then Google is very much measuring by pixels, but it's content, it's not the title tag. What do you think about that, Lee?
I mean, I think it's true. I think, the we don't measure by pixels is kind of a vague thing. It doesn't refute Moz's, saying that, hey, when they display it in the SERP, that there's a limit of 600 pixels on, in that display area. But we know a little bit more about that. Now, the information about largest contentful paint and so forth being measured in pixels, yeah, there is, you're right, there is precedent for there to be some confusion about what's measured in pixels and what's measured other ways as well. So with the source of confusion, the article came out in SEO Roundtable, and they said that was a joke. It was just a joke.
Now, what part was the joke?
They had mentioned in the live version of a podcast that they measured, title tags by, number of pixels. It was kind of an offhand comment, apparently, but it was taken to be true multiple places.
Yeah, the interesting part about it is you couldn't measure it in pixels in a browser. You could measure it in pixels in the search results, but not on a web page. And the other thing to keep in mind is Google doesn't always use the title tag. So sometimes they alter the title, text in the search results with text from elsewhere on the page or elsewhere in the URL. And so, I think Google's being honest that they're not calculating, pixel length of text in that field. So, I'm inclined to believe that it was a joke, which is, I know I'm over analyzing something that's nonsensical and stupid, but.
Well, I think a lot of times there are statements made by various people at Google that, might be technically true, but not helpful or not complete is some of the things that we found in the past. So, it sort of steps into sort of the next thing. We knew a little bit about this because of some testing that had been done. Tested data has taught us a lot of things about title tag, but two of them in particular. One is that keywords are indexed from the portion of the title tag not displayed. So if you go out beyond that 50 or 60 characters that they show in the SERP, and there's content and information out there, you can get a keyword indexed from the non-displayed portion. And we also know from testing, and I won't go too much into this, that the portion of the title tag that does not display is a useful place to put a lot of relevant information, additional keywords, etc. So what was fun about this was the other part of the article Gary Iles, they had some comments that he did say that Google does use more than what you see with your eye in the title tag, which we knew, and that there was value in having title tags longer than the displayable text. It's an important zone of the page, so use it all, even the portion that's not being visible to the user.
I wonder if I'm sensing 180,000 keyword title coming in the future to see how deep into title text can we index words.
I don't know. I might collaborate with somebody on that. It's been done before.
And just put the whole damn page in that title tag.
Yeah, and just see how far it goes. That is one of the things that is intriguing about that. Is there a limit to what you can put there? So we'll have to run that test and see what happens. So those in IMGs, stay tuned.
I think Carolyn might have done that one, and she's on the call. Or I know we played with it before, but Carolyn, did you go like how far you could go with it?
Well, I didn't do the whole page thing, but I elongated a lot of title things and used actually some entities in there, geographical entities, and to see if I could get something to rank if I use that as part of the keyword, and it worked. That's all I'm saying.
How many terms do you estimate you used in your testing? Was it dozens or hundreds? What was the scale?
If I didn't do it in a way like I would do it in a normal test, I did it just in case like a real human read it or somebody else, and so that it would make sense. So it described like, oh, it's located here, which is next to that, which has this, which, if you go a little past it, if you get to this, turn around and go back, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So readable for every block of text that could be quoted.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge.
There's a limit on how many words you can put into a search. I think it's 32 that you can actually put into a Google search. I wonder if there's some magic number around that.
I don't know, it'd be fun. I think, Carolyn, if I'm hearing you, your text length was maybe an additional, couple of sentences, paragraph, sort of, it wasn't.
Yeah, right. It wasn't like a full page of text by any means, but if it was if it took up the space of a single line, I sort of added 2 more.
Okay.
Yeah, in HTML, being a tools creator, I come across extreme cases in the SEO software that I build. And so we find these ridiculous cases that tend to break tools. So one case is like, how big is the page? Because technically there's nothing in the standard that says a web page, a single web page, can't be 42 gigabytes of text. That's allowable. Mm-hmm. And the same standard that allows a 42 gigabyte web page also allows for a 42 gigabyte title tag. And that same web standard also allows for a class attribute inside of a tag, all the little class names you give a div. That little attribute in that tag could also be 42 gigabytes. Now, do I know the number is exactly 42 gigabytes? I don't. I'd imagine that your browser would crash at some point, but there's nothing in the standard that prevents those things from being ridiculous. In title tag, that's one of those areas where it could be absolutely ginormous. And so, yeah, I like the idea of running a test. Let's put 1 million keywords in it and see what it does.
All right. We can do that. It's been done before. So that was the title tag thing. Next, we start with some update analysis. This actually started with a conversation I was having with Carolyn. She had noticed some changes in one of her SERPs, and when she ran a core report and looked, she noticed some differences So I wanted to look and see, if there were clusters around that and so forth. So I pulled 2 different core reports, one from January 7th, kind of before the update, one on March 23rd. And I limited the data to the top 100 factors on either report. So you either had to be in the top 100 on January 7th or the top 100 on March 23rd. So we're limiting it sort of the top factors. And I only looked at rank change that was, 10 or more positions. If something moved, 2 positions, I didn't care. So this came from that. The first cluster of factors that I found was that content length had moved up a lot. So just to show people, the factors here, number of sentences, number of p tags, word count, unabridged word count, they're basically all proxies for content length. And you can see what the rankings were on January 7th, the rankings were on March 23rd, and the rank change. So all of these moved up, 30, 40 positions as a cluster and individually. So content length looks like it got a lot more important in the recent update. Any thoughts on that? You guys seen anything in the field?
Well, given that Google called it the passage indexing update, I find it interesting that amount of content matters more. It would make sense to me that if Google is doing more NLP, natural language processing, on web page documents themselves, that having more content, would be beneficial to that endeavor. So I think that's interesting.
Okay. So some of these will make more sense when we start to see, sort of the trends in the clusters. So the next one we had was this one. This is where it started it with Carolyn. She goes, "Oh, one of my pages had dropped, and I noticed that exact match, became a lot more important." So she shoved some more exact match in on the page, and a few days later, it was back ranking on page 1. So these are all the exact search terms, and some of those were pretty big movers overall. I mean, those are some big movements in the exact match category. Thoughts on that?
Well, this one is really interesting because if knowledge serves me right, exact match has been kind of diminished in the factor rankings for a long time. Like, it's always been important. It's always been, top 100, which is generally pretty good. But, currently some of these are really high up there compared to where they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's the simplest factor Google can measure is, the thing that was typed into search, how many times does it appear in the document? Like, that is the basic fundamental search factor. It's probably factor number 1.
And I think what's also interesting is, we note from time to time, factors, clusters of factors come in and out of favor. Right now it looks like they're being a little more literal. I like to joke that, okay, Google's trying to become Bing because Bing is a very literal search engine. But, these factors kind of ebb and flow over time. So it looks like this is on the upswing. It really is right now being a lot more literal than it has been it's been a while since I've seen these search terms up this high.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so it makes me wonder, how far can you push exact matches right now?
Well, in testing, we've gone to 95%.
Yeah. In terms of keyword density, I don't know why it is we never feel comfortable testing at 100% density, but you're right. Google does let us index pages all the way up to 95% density, which is ridiculous because once you get, much further than 12% keyword density, it stops being English. So the practical range for keyword density is generally that 0 to 12% is where you'll find most websites are playing in. And 12 is pretty aggressive when you actually measure the competition. And in terms of exact match density, so that 0 to 12%, that's usually variation density. In terms of exact match density, it tends to be a lot lower, it tends to be a fraction of that. You generally see web pages coming in at like 1 or 2% or even less. Kyle, what's your experience with exact match density? I know you play around with it in POP as well.
I mean, well, as we all know, things like that, I think, vary keyword to keyword. And I know from stuff that it's like that you've been showing that it's kind of been diminished, but I still find it so powerful. It's something that I don't shy away from. But even if you're just like, you don't like the math at all whatsoever, I think if you just put your exact search term in your URL, meta title, or page title, H1, and then one time in the body, that's probably 60 to 70% of all SEO.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah,
there you go.
and
there's the big secret. Like, just do that.
For years we called that trio of keyword agreement in the URL, in the title, and in the H1. That was a gestalt factor, and gestalt means that the sum of the sum is greater than the sum of its parts. The outcome is greater than the sum of its parts. And so when you have that agreement in those zones, it's like something magical happens and it shoots to the top, in terms of everything else that's being equal. So if you're doing like SEO testing and you're trying to see, which combination of any 3 tags or any 3 factors is going to win, that trio typically wins that contest every time and has for years. So Kyle's exactly right. That's, where you want to go. Step 1 is get keyword agreement for your most important keyword in that zone. And then combine it with the knowledge drop that Lee put in from the title part of this show before, where you can have things be too long. Get agreement for multiple terms by making all those fields too long. At least test it first, but you might be able to exploit.
I think you just want to make sure you don't overthink it. People really like to overthink it. Just start with a basic setup and then, goes deeper or into whatever technique or tactic you want or what you're seeing within that particular SERP. But just start with at least, I think, that, and then really you've got a solid foundation.
Yeah, based on what you said earlier, Kyle, it occurred to me, and as we go through this, you'll see that we should call this the pop update, and you'll see why here in a minute. So we've dealt with title tag, meta description, much, much more important than before.
So, now, this one surprises me somewhat, because also in this same update, meta description appeared as a no index zone. So Google did a zoning update where prior to this update, you could put a keyword into a meta description and your page would index for that keyword just by that tag all by itself. Now you can't do that. If you put in a test keyword into your meta description, you can't index that page for that test keyword in that zone. It doesn't appear to work anymore. So it looks like Google made meta description a no index zone. But that doesn't mean it doesn't help you rank or help you in other ways. It just means that by itself, it cannot index your page for a keyword. But it has like these weird other effects that seem to be important. What is your read of the current state of meta descriptions, Lee?
Well, it's one of the, for a while we've noted that a lot of, keyword LSI entity factors are, consistently in the top 100, and we'll see that throughout the analysis. So What this reinforces is that this particular zone, much like the title tag, is an important zone. And they just made it more important in the current iteration of the update. So that's my read.
Yeah, and I know Google talked about on several occasions comparable fingerprints and using what a technology they developed that they call protocol buffers. And what they're essentially doing is creating a fingerprint that has nested data that they can query and analyze out of that fingerprint of your page. So imagine it as a dossier of basically the stats and description of your page, and they want to work with that compact dossier instead of your full page. And so the protocol buffer is that dossier. And one of the things that has been mentioned is going into that protocol buffer is the meta description, is the title, is some other text, is some stats. It are things like, page rank for the page, and the factors that they're coalescing for ranking are probably all going into that protocol buffer. And they described it in terms of what caffeine does, that caffeine is alive and well. And they're basically transforming your page into this dossier. And then for the whole rest of search is working with that dossier instead of the page.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever Google is putting into that package, we got to figure it out and make sure that it's tuned properly for what we want to rank for. And so, yeah, I do suspect that meta description won't help you get indexed for a keyword, but if the keyword is in it and it's in the dossier, it can probably still help you rank.
Cool. So Kyle, we've done title and meta. You want to guess what the next one is?
Going into our H1s.
Let's see here. Yeah, H tags. H tags have moved up in importance as well. All of them. Well, H1.
I like to see it. I like to see it.
It's almost like these are important zones. And I think here, you're looking at it, it's keywords, entities, LSI, the leading keyword thing has popped up a lot, which is, you see this as another one, the leading keywords factors in the various zones pops up from time to time, and then it diminishes from time to time. But it's almost like the base structure of the page, those important zones just collectively have all gotten more important in this update.
Yeah, and I believe Gary Iles said that headings were going into the protocol buffers too. So if that's true, headings would be very important.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next one. This was the one that was most interesting for me. That is the several questions-based factors moved up significantly. And I wondered if they were calling this the passage indexing, and a lot of the information they were talking about dealt with Q&A, whether this was the big reveal of passage indexing, whether this was the thing that showed that, yes, they're a little bit more important now than before. I don't know.
Well, if you look at technologies like BERT and Smith, they're very good at finding like standard formatted question and answer scenarios, being able to understand those. And then when people ask questions in search, they're good at pointing out pages with answers and even highlighting what the answer is. So if Google is running BERT on, like, say, all primary index pages, then the occurrence or the co-occurrence of questions, correlating with ranking should go up. especially if having the answer on your page is important. Then having the question on the page may also trend upwards with it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's causal, but it could be. And I definitely know that if you go through the, and test BERT a lot in search, if you go through the results, sometimes the exact match question appears to rank well and appears to be a keyword. But also sometimes you also see the AI variations, the answers to the questions being keywords. What do you think about that, Kyle?
Sorry, I missed the last part. My son just woke up and I had to deal with something.
Oh, no worries. We were just asking you, what are your thoughts about questions appearing to be stronger? We are talking in terms of, maybe it's related to passage indexing using BERT or something like that, which is, question and answer detection.
So I'm not really sure how to quantify it, but it always has struck me as a good idea that when you see people also ask to including those within the page. And a technique that I like, though, is kind of unquestioning the question. In a sense, if you see a question that's people also ask and then turning it into a statement, you end up with good sections on your page. You'll be answering or you'll be providing information that from a user perspective is going to provide good information. But then also what I found is that your match counts often hit where they need to be just based on simply getting something within the right context. So I'm not really sure data wise, like from what Lee is showing here, but from just a practical standpoint, it seems like something you should do.
Yeah, and a lot of people miss really good questions because they're limited. They look at what various tools say, but for a lot of topics, you can find really great questions by going to, more off the beaten path places. For example, if you're trying to tune a page for like a lawnmower, go look at 10 or 15 different lawnmowers on Amazon and look at all the questions that people left there, and you could probably collate a ton of questions provided by just hundreds of people, get all the good ones and work with those. And oftentimes there'll even be a lot of good answers, so you'll at least have a prototype answer to go with it from that type of question research. And usually if it's a trusted seller or trusted brand, the information is usually on point as well. So Lee, where do you mine question answer info?
Oh, anywhere I can get it. I'll use tools, to go get it. I will certainly use the people also ask, those things that pop up, scraping for, who, what, when, where, how, plus keyword type of searches, is helpful. And what was the answer? The public is another great place to, just scrape a ton of keywords, question-based terms. So.
Yeah, I'm always 50-50 with answer the public. Half the time it's got nothing for me.
Well, I think it's like any other tool. Sometimes it comes back, with hundreds of questions, but, you still have to edit it down because not all of them are necessarily as on point as they need to be. So. Now, one of the questions, we looked at the who are the winners in this. This was the loser. This was the big loser. And there were two things that were interesting to me about this. One is, the Ahrefs data seemed to be different than the Majestic and Moz data in terms of, the magnitude of the move. So, I don't know if backlinks moved down just because some other factors overtook them a little bit, or if backlinks moved down because of some systemic thing, and brings into question which backlink set of factors are more accurate. Is it Ahrefs, Majestic, Moz, etc.?
Well, the good news is that SEMrush data is going to be coming back into these reports. So that's back online again in Cora. So we'll start getting more backlink data to compare. Yeah, it's interesting how much further down the DOM detailer data went. And DOM detailer is reselling API data from Majestic and Moz.
Right.
And I don't have a good explanation why Majestic and Moz would be hit harder. The only things that come to mind for me would be, how relevant is their database of backlink samples? Is it too small in scope? Um, yeah, it's really interesting that they fell that far.
And maybe, I don't know because I didn't look at it closely. Maybe the usage data within Cora has changed, because if there are different types of keywords that are being searched in January versus, March, maybe that, had an impact if, the DOM detailer data is utilized on a lower percentage of the Cora users data. That can change it as well.
Yeah, that's true too. I'll have to go back and take a look. But I mean, that's a big fall going from 26 to 161.
Right.
I mean, that's gigantic.
Yeah, so can't really say anything definitive about this, because if the Ahrefs data, for example, were accurate, and you had a number of factors that just jumped and overtook them, then that's going to move them down 10, but that's not really a big indicative movement. It just says, hey, you've been pushed down a little bit, something else moved a little bit above you.
Yep. Mike is asking on YouTube, is that saying backlinks aren't as important? Well, first and foremost, this data is coming out of the Cora community shared data. So thousands upon thousands of keyword reports are shared to the main server, and we analyze this data across, all those different keywords and find out how things are performing overall. And Cora measures depending upon which APIs you have enabled, can measure up to 2,050 different possible ranking factors. So when we talk about this list, we're talking about a leaderboard of up to 2,050 different factors. These backlink ones have dropped to the top 200. So it's still way up there at the top. They're still beneficial. You still want backlinks. None of that has changed. They're just not as high as they were. They were, previously, generally around, top 50 on the list. Now they're in top 200. It's a noteworthy step down in importance, but they're still beneficial. They're still important. It's just interesting to see how they fell within the the top of the list.
Yeah, that's also when you look collectively, you've got word count, you've got the title, the meta description, the H tags, all of that stuff is very much the top on page sort of factors are pushed up in this particular update. So naturally, if those have got to go up, the off page like backlinks and other things have to move down a little bit. So I'd agree with you. It doesn't mean that they're dead. Everybody likes to say backlinks are dead from time to time, but it really just could be that other things have been emphasized a little bit more. And I'll just leave it at that. So that is what we have today. Questions, final thoughts, etc.?
Well, I want to thank you for doing this analysis. Not many people volunteer to, analyze and present data. So I want to thank you for coming on the show and doing that, because it definitely made my week a lot easier. And so I guess the question is, what are you going to bring next time?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, Ted.
I'm just kidding. But I would love to have more of your research on the show.
Oh, no problem.
So definitely, when you have something to report, let us know, and we'll bring you back on to report. And again, if you're wondering where this data came from, you can go to SEOtoollab.com. It's Cora SEO software. And it measures this data on your page, compares you to your higher ranking competitors, and tells you how you're different. I will warn you, it's a technical tool, so if you're not a technical person, you may be overwhelmed by the measurement data. But if you love spreadsheets and having exact measurements for things, for how your page is different, then check it out. This might be for you. Also, check out Page Optimizer Pro. It is kind of a quick wins tool with the respect that it's not doing 2,000 factors. It's doing, dozens of factors, but the important ones that Kyle is isolated and testing. And it also has great UI for agencies. So if you're trying to do workflow type operations, there may be advantages in Page Optimizer Pro. So check out those two tools, and we will see you all next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.